General Woodrow Winterspore and his loyal army have finally made it to the city of Baldur's Gate, where we'll face our most deadly foes yet in the form of controversy. Can our heroes escape from wrongful imprisonment and, worst of all, the corrupt police state led by the only man who truly gets us? All while we try and take over both this world and whatever afterlife awaits mortal souls. Well, we got one way to find out. On to the video. Our gallant general has finally escaped that awful shadow curse and is set to arrive in the big city tomorrow, so we settle down for the evening, when all of a sudden we're accosted by some Githyanki who must really want to join our horde given the fact that they're trying to fight us of all people. But that's a problem for a later time. For now, we just misty step away and dash all the way through the portal that they came out of. And ooh boy, what's a fella gotta do to reanimate that thing? Anyways, there's some Gith here too, being a nuisance to our dream visitor who we very much so need alive, but before we can run to their rescue, we gotta get the whole squad up and running. Then we jump into action to save the day. The first set of two that we encounter isn't at all difficult, as we shove one of them to an eternity of floating through space, and the gang has a good old-fashioned bonding beatdown with the sole remaining one. As we head to where our dream visitor is, we flesh out the squad a bit more, remember to cast Longstrider on them as always, and jump down to the big old God Skull, where we find a friendly Mind Flayer. How curious. They're getting their butt kicked, but yes, indeed, this Illithid is our old dreamy pal. It doesn't really matter what they look like since we need them alive, but their inability to fend for themselves is not a good look. The fight starts in proper with a few of our brainiac buddies being taken down, but on our turn we start with a, you guessed it, 4th level Moonbeam to whittle away while we skedaddle somewhere safer. Our Mind Flayer pal manages to stun one of them, and our army at last begins to open fire, dealing pretty good damage to a couple of them to start. As it gets back to us, we try to take down the fella who's weakest, but this just results in us getting blasted by some solidified air, and then blown up alongside a large amount of our summons. Seems they know who's in charge. Either way, the Emperor, so our ally calls himself, is able to dominate one of them for a turn, while the rest of our goons keep these Gith distracted. And the first one goes down to our Moonbeam, which means we get to start beaming our next target, who is less than thrilled about the prospect and takes out 2 of our summons in return. Their buddy also breaks free of the domination no problem and starts bullying some of our other fellas. The bumbling battalion continues to beat these bozos just a bit more, and a meaty Moonbeam hit on our next target means we've got 2 down and 2 to go. One of them goes after us, but a quick shield bash knocks him down and the MP stuns them. Meanwhile, the other is all tied up killing our Woad instead. A couple rounds and a couple last beams is all we need to finish off the stunned one, and the Emperor further proves themselves a horrible ally by waiting to use chain lightning until there's just one foe who's about to die anyways. Yeah, we're gonna replace this guy the first chance we get, and as it turns out, it's actually this imprisoned Gith whose power is protecting us, and a plan starts to form, but we'll need a way to free him first. For now though, we just portal back to camp and find something already got the Gith out here, so we just pick up their bodies for later use and call it a night so we're nice and rested in the morning. When we wake up, this thing approaches us, but everyone knows kids are immortal, so since we can't get use out of her, we tell her to scram. Elsewhere on the way into town, we find Ferg Drogher, who sells us the Hellrider Longbow, and while we don't actually have proficiency with this thing, it does still give us a +3 initiative, so there's no harm in keeping it on us. Unfortunately, as we continue onwards, we find the way into town is closed, cause old Gortash is getting coronated on the roadside, but with a potion of flying in tow, drawbridges really don't matter much at all to us. Once inside the fortress, we meet Gortash himself, who immediately is very friendly with us. He even goes so far as to congratulate us on beating Ketheric. Could you imagine little old Woodrow getting recognized by an Archduke? This is our kind of guy. He takes things further by proposing to us. Well, by proposing a divine oath sworn upon spirit and flesh to work together. And I mean, this guy just gets us, so how could we refuse? All we gotta do is beat Orin and then rule the world forever after with our new bosom buddy, the only man to ever treat us as an equal. We stick around very briefly for the coronation and get skedaddling into town, where we head straight to gloomy Fentonson, from which we grab the Armour of Agility. This 17 AC medium armor lets us add our full dex mod, setting us up to a whopping 24 AC with all of our other gear, in addition to giving us +2 to all saving throws. Now, there is some other armor we'll be getting soon, so we won't be wearing this all of the time, just most of the time. Right nearby is a big old wizard tower, tower, and as we head to its top we meet Loroakin, a smarmy little fellow who really wants to buy the Night Song off of our hands. And well, it wouldn't be much of a hassle. For now, we just decide to take a look around his vaults to see if he's got anything useful. We find plenty of insanely powerful magical scrolls, one of which lets us summon an angelic Deva for a boost to our army. But arguably the most important thing we find in here is the Tharkiate Codex, which is exactly what we need to finish reading the Necromancy of Thay book that we picked up way back when. Indeed, after passing just one more check, we gain the ability to cast Danse Macabre to summon 4 AI-controlled ghouls once per long rest that explode on death. Trust me on this one though, AI-controlled and explode on death is a rough combo, so we won't be using them too often. Then we saunter down to the Stormshore Tabernacle to see if any gods of destruction care to bless our rampage. And for the low cost of 3,000 gold, we get the Anointed in Splendor permanent buff for yet another +2 to all of our saving throws, making us even tankier. With that out of the way, the gang is looking a little dead, so to liven them up, we decide to take him for a swing by the circus, but they absolutely refuse to let us in, and so a fight breaks out with their ghoul guard. Which, well, let's just say Moonbeam doesn't go great with our new exploding ghouls. We try not to let it get us down and enjoy the circus in their memory, wherein we find Stony of Stony and Boney's Creations, who let us commission a statue of ourselves for 5,000 gold. It is also mostly naked to show off our manly muscles, of course. And it also gives sweet stone features for a permanent 1d4 bonus to attacks and saving throws. When we head off to bed for the evening, this creature is back, begging for us to let her stay. However, we just throw her food away in an attempt to get her out of here. Turns out it was just Orin pulling a prank on us, which, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Only such an insane monster could come up with a thing like Yenna. Then she turns into our bestie and tries to convince us to betray him, but alas, the bonds of brotherhood are ironclad, so we just tell her to bugger off. The next morning, we find a suspicious false wall in the city with the stench of necromancy inside. Sure enough, beyond this wall, we meet Mystic Carrion, an ancient mummy lord with powerful magics. We can tell he'd be a tough cookie to crack, but there really can be only one necromantic master in town. For now though, we play along and try and find his weaknesses by asking him what he needs help with. Turns out he's got a rogue zombie on the loose that needs wrangling, so onwards to Wranglin' we go. Before that though, we also purchase the Armour of the Sporekeeper, 13 AC light armor that increases our spell save DC and necrotic damage by 1. More importantly, it also gives us the ability to create 3 types of special spores once per long rest, the kingpin of which is haste spores. Essentially a free haste spore grenade, so we won't use this armor frequently, but we'll throw it on if we ever want our group to do stuff real fast and real often. During our search, we get jumped by some Sahuagin from the ocean. It's a pretty straightforward fight that can be taken out nice and quick with some lightning, a spike growth in the corner so as to not hit NPCs, and a veritable horde of underlings to take them out. But once they're out of the way, in a nearby hut we find Thrumbo, the missing zombie, only to be yoinked out of the conversation by a guard on the other side of town getting aggroed on us. This one took a while to figure out why, but it's cause Sailor Pete decided to unalive himself using our spike growth that we forgot to cancel. Well, at least it's just one guard. Wait, 2 now. And a fire elemental as well. Surely that can't go wrong. And half of our summons just blew up. And then the other half got by burning too. Well, we clean him up eventually and go back to our conversation soon after. The long and short of it is, Thrumbo knows Mystic Carrion's heart is hidden somewhere beneath the city, and if we destroy it, we'll be able to kill him. So we get a looking through the sewers, moonbeam some grease elementals, and eventually stumble across a cursed crypt filled to the brim with undead, both ours and enemies. With a spike growth in the entryway, the enemies have no choice but to saunter on up to us, taking a bunch of damage in the process. And when they finally make it up to us, the whole squad is waiting to deliver the last few blows. Rinse and repeat for a few minutes and we clear out the whole room easy peasy. Our first reward for getting this done is level 10, and alongside it a new subclass feature, Spreading Spores. So long as we have our symbiotic entity active, we can use a bonus action to make a little cloud of damaging spores that only hurts enemies. The damage isn't great, but it's also pretty much free, so not too shabby. Continuing on, we bust our way through a wall to gain access to a hidden room, wherein we find our target's brain, as well as their liver just tucked in some jars. Also in here, we find a tablet talking about how he had hid his heart inside of a reanimated corpse. Woodrow's investigation then takes us to the city's mortuary. Once we lockpick our way inside, we find the old sport's lungs just laying on the table. But we still need his heart, so off we go to Thrumbo to make him vomit it out for us. After acquiring all of Mysticarian's bits and bobs, we have a preemptive, or maybe long overdue, funeral pyre for him. Then we're back at his mansion, but before the fight, we activate our Shriek and jump right into the tussle. We've got our Sporekeeper armor on, which means we start by haste sporing the whole battalion and dropping a fat wall of fire on as many of the baddies as we can. A spike growth from our Dryad further makes this place an absolute nightmare to traverse, while the squad continues to open fire on anything that moves. It's a bit of a nightmare logistically, but eventually we're able to command our troops to whittle down the first casualty. And even though the head honcho gets a turn, they just waste it targeting our Azer. We drop concentration on wall of fire and the growth so our summons can actually get in and start blasting away. A brutal cloud kill by everyone's favorite MC starts ticking away at the good guys in return. However, our flame elemental stops the big baddie before things get out of control. The cloud kill is still here though, so that's cool. Either way, with how outnumbered the enemies are, we can easily clean up the last of them. And after telling Thrumbo the good news, he rewards us with the Crypt Lord ring. This little trinket lets us cast Create Undead once per long rest, letting us turn a humanoid corpse into a far more useful mummy that serves as yet another powerful recruit. Unfortunately, with all this reanimating going on, we're a little light on corpses, so we get to collecting some more from random folks about town. After we kill this chef though, this strange fella shows up soon after and talks about how he wants to help us become the ultimate murderer. So he gives us a list of names and sends us on our merry way. Naturally, we send in a lone skeleton to the local wine festival to do this assassination for us, only for the guards to approach and try and arrest the skeleton. I feel like he could just wiggle his hands out of the cuffs. Anyways, somewhat surprisingly, poor skeleton archer isn't great at talking their way out of things, so they're given two options to choose from. I don't know how in the world the guards decided this was the best course of action, but their mercy grows thin when skeleton archer takes their frustration out on the nearby wall. It seems even in the great city of Baldur's Gate, police brutality is still a prevalent problem. This guy, however, decides that was the coolest thing he ever did see and extends an offer to join his super cool murder cult. We acquiesce cause, well, murder is half the fun of assembling an undead army anyways. And that's how we wind up in front of Saravok Onchev, a Ballist known for wreaking havoc across the city, who also decides our bony bonanza a few moments earlier is worthy of celebration. All we gotta do is kill a cop, and after what they did to our boy, it's not hard to justify. Just like that, we've stumbled into being Ball's newest unholy assassin, and in the process gained access to where Orin is hiding. Since we promised our best friend Gortash that we would deal with her, off we go with the whole squad in tow and Falara Louv pre-activated. For some reason, she's really convinced we care about what happens to this kid, but if anything, it actually is kinda better if she offs her for us since we couldn't get that corpse ourselves. Then she transforms into a big ol' monster and the long-awaited showdown finally begins. We're up first and drop some haste spores for the squadron, then we thunderwave one of Orin's goons off the edge, damaging her in the process too. To cap out our turn, we also get Connor out here to join the fun, and of course use our halo of spores as per usual. As we get open firing on the manic murderer, we realize our air elemental's dex save based multi-hits aren't great against her because of evasion. At the very least, our air elemental makes for a great tank so that she doesn't jump the rest of our troop, who all slowly but surely get shooting, whacking, blasting, and whatever else they can do, one whole damage at a time thanks to her unstoppable stacks. Until eventually, one punch lands a genuine hit for a decent bit of damage. We get a couple more like this as well, taking her all the way down to half HP on round 1. When she's nice and surrounded, anyone who still has actions starts walloping the only goon who's actually doing stuff. Ball isn't so willing to let go of his chosen though, and refreshes all of her unstoppable stacks at the end of the round. Despite that, for some reason, our spreading spores still do full damage, and to get some passive ticks on her, we also conjure up a Moonbeam. At this point, Orin uses an ability I have never even heard of before that applies a short condition that would buff up her AC by 1 if something dies with it active. Between that and the fact that our haste spores are too far for our summons to use them, it becomes dang near impossible to break through her stacks before they are once again reset. A problem that just becomes worse as she takes out more and more of our gang. But don't let anyone tell you death by 1,000 cuts isn't a viable strategy, especially especially when some cuts, like a bone chill, also ignore unstoppable. Ball's bestest baby girl finally realizes we're in charge, however, and jumps over to us while crushing all of our skeletons. We get our revenge by destroying her goon in turn, and now it's a proper 1v10 beatdown as nature intended. It does take a few more rounds and quite a while, but eventually the 1000th cut is delivered by our newest recruit. This causes everyone performing Orin's ritual to join the fight, but a cloud kill turns this fight into an inevitability, especially so alongside our Danse Macabre ghouls. With everyone out of the way, her netherstone is easy pickings, and just like that, we've got all we need to meet up with Gordy and become absolute. But there's a few other things that we want to do first. Starting by leveling up to level 11, which grants us access to 6th level spells. The most notable of these is Hero's Feast, which can buff up all of our summons, but we also get to upcast our existing summon spells to conjure elemental Myrmidons as well as groups of ghouls. Next on our list is some group counseling to deal with the traumatic wrongful death of Skeleton Archer. So we're off to the House of Grief so that we can become the best version of ourselves for our eternal union with Gortash. As this is happening though, we realize our mind is getting red and confront our therapist on it, who reveals themselves to be Viconia DeVere, a drow matron leader in a Sharan cult, and this is all a front. You know what that means. It's time to head into their secret basement and bring this whole place down. We start by cloud killing a whole lot of them and skedaddling up the stairs from which we came. On their turns, they teach us the hard way that darkness clouds overwrite cloud kill, and as it turns out, stairs overwrite spike growth. Every day I feel more and more that stairs are the true final boss of this game. Either way, on our next turn, we retreat further and decide to give our new Wall of Thorns spell a shot, since I've never really seen it used. While we're prepping for the fight to come to us, most of our summons are still in the main room getting picked off. But once they're clear, the first of the enemies dive into the Wall of Thorns, and it's kinda just mediocre damage honestly, in the low double digits. We do have the Dryad cast a spike growth just on the other side as well at the edge. I was so unimpressed by the wall that I kinda forgot that we were concentrating on it and switched to a spike growth, which glitches out and doesn't actually cast. And the worst part is there wasn't even any stairs nearby to blame. To make matters worse, some enemies just teleport right on over the spike growth that does exist, including Viconia, who straight up deletes our last summon. Her goons also land a few tickles on us when initiative gets back to them, so as revenge we use a speed potion to cast a cloud kill, which triggers our bloodlust elixir. Then we use a wall of fire to further damage all of these clustered cultists, all before dashing far away so they can't gang up on us. Viconia manages to get all the way to us, but most of them just run on through the burning inferno instead. Woodrow on his turn uses a 5th level Moonbeam, which doesn't trigger Radiant Retort since it doesn't count as us actually dealing the damage. And of course, we continue to scuttle backwards. Since none of them even come close to reaching us, we're able to pick off all the folks ahead of the pack and even end up with a leftover action which we use to summon us, who valiantly protects us while we sleep off the effects of that speed potion we took. As a reward for their efforts, we blast them with a thunder wave as we try and fail to shove enemies into the abyss, after which we just take another speed potion and do it again, but this time actually succeed. From here, there's just not enough enemies to do any harm to us, so we're free to pick them off in any which way we so feel. Let's be real, most of the time we're feeling Moonbeam. One of our rewards for this fight is Viconia's Walking Fortress. This is a +3 AC shield, gives us advantage on saves against all spells, spell attack rolls have disadvantage against us, and we can even reflect projectiles for a few turns with it. It's an incredibly powerful shield, and we will happily give up our crit immunity for it. Reward number 2 is found in the back room, in the form of the Mirror of Loss, which after passing a check lets us sacrifice some memories for a permanent +2 to our wisdom, setting it up to 22. Well, it did help to give up some of our traumatic memories from that incident with, well, whatever we were upset about, a good shopping spree always helps more. And after dyeing all of our armor, I gotta say, we're feeling good. I sure hope Gortash likes it. In a platonic way, of course. Any hoodles, next thing to do on our to-do list before we see him is assert our dominance over the local vampire lord. As you know, there can only be one Master of the Dead in town. Unfortunately, to get to him, we first need to get through his very sinister door. One can only imagine the horrors that await on the other side. To pop this bad boy off its hinges, first we shove our way past the dead girl and steal her most private book. Then we team up with Connor to prove Cazador's minions ain't worth a penny, before stealing one of their rings. With these two pieces in hand, we're able to head back to the start and see what atrocities this vain vampire has conjured up. Oh god, what did I walk in on? Please tell me there's pants where the screen cuts off. Regardless, before we bother to find out an answer to that particular question, we just start casting Cloud Kill all over the room to get rid of this horde as quick as possible, while conveniently covering up anything we don't want to see. Now we're on to the man of the house, but first we get all of our summons out and precast Daylight. It seems this spell bugs the fight though, and without fail, if we have it active and approach Cazador, he doesn't actually start his ritual, even if we don't have the weapon enchanted with Daylight equipped. And we really want to beat him at his best, so we just drop Falara Louv on the stairs and decide to come back for it later. He has his villain monologue now that it's gone, and we kick off the fight and he kicks off his empowering ritual. Of course, we get rewarded with a blight right in the face, but a necrotic resistance elixir keeps the damage somewhat low. A haste spore grenade behind us is set to get all of our goons to where they need to go on their first turns. We do have new members to the squad, such as a trio of flying ghouls capable of flying straight to the far ritual circles, and an air Myrmidon capable of stunning enemies for 2 turns with just a regular melee attack. Either way, this fight turns into complete chaos almost immediately, with our minions getting walloped and walloping in turn, as everyone is kinda just hitting whoever is closest to them. Woodrow did at least pick up our sword, so Cazador's HP is ticking down from the sunlight, and the boys are out here fighting for their lives, taking out whatever they can. Then after a few turns, Mr. Star finally ascends. Now we can really face him at his strongest, just as we intended, and it's definitely not because I forgot that standing on the circles doesn't actually interrupt the ritual. Since this is on patch 6, he heals a whopping 100 HP per round, sunlight or no, so as a Hail Mary, we toss that mysterious iron flask we picked up way back when, and out comes a spectator. The kindly Cazador even sees our struggle and blows himself up a little bit too, though he doesn't make a habit of it and prefers to keep hitting us. We have plenty of healing potions to make up for it, but they don't heal as much as I'd like since I forgot to re-equip the periaptive wound closure while doing our prep for the day. Either way, not all is lost. Once we clear out all of his beastly bootlickers, as well as the spectator, it's just Cazador, Mummy, and ourselves. Meaning we get to cast haste on ourselves and bone chill away for a smidgen of damage, but also prevent old healing. We summon a Deva too using that scroll we got earlier to help out, though its accuracy isn't the best. Since this whole process is taking longer than we'd like, we speed things up with the Artistry of War scroll we stole, which almost single-handedly erases all his HP. And indeed, it's our angelic savior that brings it all home. Nice ascension, bucko. Imagine if a real master of the undead was to benefit from it. Next on our to-do list is to try and rob Raphael, because we hear he's got a way to free Orpheus and replace the Emperor. So we head off to the Devil's Fee and open a portal to the 9 Hells and the House of Hope, where we immediately get greeted by Hope, who manages to bring back a whole lot of bad memories with the way she says hello. Regardless, she won't let us in unless we agree to rescue her from Raphael's torture, so we must acquiesce, but things never go great for people who force us into stuff. Our first stop in this massive mansion is the archives, where Raffi keeps all the best loot, and this loser threatens us to not take any of it. And now we just gotta take it, though this does ruin our disguise and alert everyone in the house that we're not supposed to be here. All that means is we mobilize the troops and issue the extermination protocol, which isn't the easiest thing against these Hellspheres that popped up, but we can at least get them to stop hurting our troops with a planar binding. However, this just makes it resort to hurting itself. I promise you, Hellsphere, there's healthier ways to cope. The army does eventually get whittled down throughout the big gang fight, but our general himself is never in any real danger, and we're able to defeat all of our foes, including one dude who looks a lot like Raphael. In fact, this guy actually has a key to the big man's safe, in which we find the passcode to be able to grab the Orphic Hammer, aptly named as it's what's able to free Orpheus. From doing all of this, we hit our final level, level 12, and with it our very last feat, for which we take Tough to increase our max HP even further, since the only thing we're worried about is getting down before we can heal ourselves back up on our turn. It's not like we were light on hit points before, but now we're definitely going to be able to take a few hits from anybody. Once that's done, we head back to the archives and pop open the magical barrier, letting us at last grab the hammer that we came here for. Now, we could just head out, but we know Hope is around here somewhere, and she can't get away with forcing us to play by her rules. First, however, we've got to beat up her jailers, and a high-level Moonbeam trivializes this fight too, especially since the imps here fail fail to hit us, and the spectators really struggle with the concept of doors. And so once they're all out of the way, we get bashing on Hope's bonds and set her free, as yet another expendable recruit conscripted to our growing horde. Speaking of the horde, let's get summoning them. Oh, and would you look at that? The bath here restores our fungal infestation charges. In case you've been wondering why I haven't mentioned the fungal servants in a while, it's because we were saving them up for this. Let me tell you, it took a lot of rat killing to get to where we are. We end up with upwards of 50 creatures under our control, all buffed up with Hero's Feast. Even Hope gets in on the fun by summoning an earth elemental using a scroll we brought. Then we get everyone into position all around the exit portal, and sure enough, when we try to leave, the master of the house returns at last. Alongside, this lady and our old pal and fellow rat hunter, Yurgir, who very much so admires the dedication with which we've collected all of these rat corpses, so when the fight starts, he joins on our side. Not that you can really tell, as he blasts friend and foe alike. On our turn, we slam down a haste spore grenade to make this go a whole lot faster. Then we learn the hard way that Moonbeam doesn't damage the soul pillars that are buffing up Raffi. The enemies pretty much just blast whoever they can that's closest, and then the turn order finally passes to the majority of our gang. Most of those who can get put on pillar duty, knocking down a couple of them. The fungal zombies can't attack them because they're objects, so they surround whoever is closest to them instead. On following rounds, we use Moonbeam to pick at the champions, alongside our spreading spores. Meanwhile, the rambunctious Raffi is more than happy to whiff all of his single target attacks on our summons. As it gets back to the big battalion, Hope takes out the third pillar with a couple guiding bolts, and an earth elemental is able to finish off the very last one. Now with the pillars gone, it's time to slowly but surely have our crew bash down the enemies for a few damage at a time. Unfortunately, the head honcho finally realizes he's got incredible AoE attacks to kill all of our zombies, and despite them being soulless husks, he's still able to restore his soul charges by killing them. But at the very least, for a little while, we get him trapped in a corner with Moonbeam at full force on him. Not long after that, we also get the last champion, and this poor devil is now trapped in a 1v40. Okay, maybe a 1v30 now. Either way, this takes an absolute eternity to finish with attacks from our goons, more often than not doing nothing, not to mention the occasional blast that wipes out so many of our fellows. It's pretty much just Moonbeam that's dealing damage. By the end of this marathon, due to the nigh on infinite soul charges he has, our initiative order looks much less impressive. At the very end of the slog, we use Hope's divine intervention to take Raphael out with a bang. Unfortunately, Hope lives, but hey, you can't win them all. We'll just have to make the world hopeless in a different way. With everything we need all wrapped up, it's time at last to reunite with Gordhash and resonate our nether stones. When all seems like smooth sailing though, he threatens us and things get tense. But as it turns out, he was just having a friendly little jab at us and yanking our chain, as equals do. Then he tells us where to meet him so we can finally control the brain. So off we go to the morphic pool under the city, and out comes the biggest and wrinkliest brain you ever did see, which is so powerful that it's capable of pulling us into its expansive psyche, but surely with the power of our super manly and platonic friendship, we'll be able to... oh, that's not good. Our failings causes our beloved buddy to fall dead. Indeed, just like that, the only man who ever understood Woodrow Winterspore is gone. Thankfully, before it can blast us too, the Emperor manages to actually do something useful and save our lives, for self-interest if nothing else. Then he makes the mistake of saying this, and what we're about to do in a moment becomes a whole lot easier. We tell him we're freeing Orpheus for that one, and off he goes to join his arch-nemesis. Sure, why not, buddy? And welcome back to the land of the living, Prince Orpheus, who reluctantly agrees to be our ally to defeat the Netherbrain. Well, perhaps even more reluctantly agreeing to become a mind flayer so he can properly wield the Netherstones to subdue it. When we return back to the real world, it seems that we don't have much time left if we're to rule over anything afterwards. So we quickly get running towards the brain, and as we head into the closest building, find this guy delivering a speech to an empty room, and I mean, hey, more power to you, man. A small enemy army in between us and the brain has us using an invisibility potion so that the two of us can stealth past them no problem. Afterwards, all we gotta do is get to the top of this tower while a nautiloid rains down a barrage on top of us. I'm sure you can imagine how a levitating mind flayer would make this process a whole lot smoother. Upon arriving at the top, this is our last chance to prepare for the end, so we summon as many fellas as we can, though it's nowhere near as much as we had for the House of Hope. Once we're ready, we at last climb to the top of the brain, and look who's ready to throw down their life for the enemy cause all of a sudden. Trust me, bucko, this one isn't going your way. Orpheus starts us off with a dimension door to the opposite side of the arena, then we use a Featherfall scroll to trigger counterspells from all of the Illithids, followed up with a Globe of Invulnerability to keep our newest recruit standing while they channel the Netherstones. Meanwhile, our soldiers are doing their best to keep the enemy forces occupied, but this doesn't stop one of the mind flayers from stunning Woodrow. Thankfully, Orpheus completes the channeling regardless, creating a portal once again into the brain's psyche. On this following round, our merry crew realizes their general is in a pinch and does a much better job at keeping our foes focused on them. Thus, our champion is able to make it inside too when next round cycles back. All of the troops have gotten us this far, and it would be unbecoming for a leader to do the dirty work himself, which means we buff up a water Myrmidon that we summoned in here to hell and back with Fierce Perilous Stakes, each instance of this buff reducing the crit threshold and adding on 15 extra psychic damage to each hit. So when they finally cut loose, it's our ultimate soldier that obliterates the enemy in one fell swoop, destroying them absolutely. That one is for Gortash. The brain begs for its life at the very end, offering us the power to wield it and become absolute ourselves. It's not a hard choice to betray Orpheus and take the stones for ourselves, to at last take our throne at the very top of the world. Who will dare to stand against us now, as the whole world at last is made into our army? After all, who even could stand against us?
In my name.
Thank you all so much for the support on this series. Feels good to get this one done, cause by golly, the fights were a nightmare to control. As always, check the description if you want to support the channel. And a special thanks to our Storyteller tier members, Bunny Warren, Damon, Shirtles, Mark Rainbow, Vivian, Garrett Sapp, Rat King, Saturn Girl Pining, Lovely Velvet, Apricot Antlers, Beltfed Joe, Lumina, Chance Hine, Steven SSD, Game Life Coaching, El Guardia, Cluck Vader, Alara Luna, Achilles the Spartan, Cody Lumi, and Shay1337.